She wore a badge, carried a gun, and swore to protect. But one night, Officer Antoinette Frank did the unthinkable. She walked into a quiet family-run restaurant in New Orleans and shot her own partner dead. That alone was shocking enough. But she wasn't finished. Minutes later, she returned, still in uniform with her badge shining, and tried to kill the last remaining witnesses. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't a moment of panic. It was a cold, calculated murder. And that's just the beginning. Because what drove her to pull the trigger goes deeper than anyone imagined. This wasn't just about money. It was about trauma, corruption, manipulation, and a hidden body buried right under her home. This is the story of a police officer turned predator. A case that shook New Orleans. And now, after decades on death row, she might escape execution. Let's go back to where it all started. In early 1993, Antoinette Frank joined the New Orleans Police Department. On paper, she seemed like the perfect recruit. Young, ambitious, and one of the top graduates of her academy class. For a city drowning in crime and corruption, she looked like hope in a uniform. But the truth was very different. Frank had failed not one, but 2 psychiatric evaluations. One of the doctors even warned the department directly, "Don't hire her." She showed signs of emotional instability, poor decision-making, and couldn't handle pressure. She also lied on her application, but the department was desperate. They needed officers fast, so the red flags were ignored. Morale was low, salaries were terrible, and the city was under pressure to diversify the force. That gave Frank an edge. On February 7, 1993, she was sworn in as an officer. From the start, something felt off. She came across as quiet, distant, and hard to connect with. Other officers described her as cold, almost robotic. She wasn't aggressive, but she also wasn't alert. Supervisors tried to help her catch up. They gave her more training, more oversight. She even got a few community service awards. But those awards weren't signs of success. They were damage control. Nobody realized it at the time, but the NOPD had just armed someone who didn't belong to the force. And behind that badge was someone capable of far worse than anyone expected. On the night of November 25, 1994, Antoinette Frank responded to a routine call. A man had been shot in the street. His name was Rogers LaCaze, a 19-year-old drug dealer with a smooth tongue and a long record. Most officers would have treated him as a suspect, but Frank didn't. Some say she was trying to help him. Others believe she was drawn to him immediately. Whatever the reason, that night marked the beginning of something dangerous, something no one in the department saw coming. Frank started visiting him. She told her coworkers she was helping him get clean, but soon people noticed odd behavior. She let LaCaze drive her personal car. He was spotted sitting inside her squad car in full view while she was on duty. When people asked, she called him her nephew or a trainee. She brushed off questions like it was nothing. But behind closed doors, they weren't hiding much. Frank and LaCaze were in a relationship, one that crossed every ethical line. She didn't care that he sold drugs. She knew his criminal history. She knew he'd been shot before and might have even killed someone. But she ignored everything to stay by his side. In February 1995, just 1 month before the killings, something happened that should have set off alarms, but didn't. Frank and LaCaze were out late at night when they pulled over 2 men who had just left a party. Frank was in full police uniform. LaCaze wasn't, but he was armed. Witnesses say that during the stop, an argument broke out. Things escalated fast. LaCaze pulled out a Tech-9 pistol and waved it around. One of the men tried to run. That's when a civil sheriff happened to pass by. What he saw shocked him. Officer Antoinette Frank, still in uniform, stood there silently as LaCaze pointed the gun. She didn't try to de-escalate the situation. She didn't arrest him. Instead, she defended him. She told the sheriff, "He's a good guy." The gun, the threats, the danger, none of it mattered to her. And just like that, the moment passed. No report was filed. No investigation followed. It was completely ignored. That single decision, that quiet night, could have stopped everything. But it didn't, and less than a month later, 3 people would be dead. On March 4, 1995, just after midnight, the Kim On restaurant in New Orleans East had already closed for the night. The staff members of the tight-knit Vu family were cleaning up, ready to head home. Antoinette Frank had been there twice already that night. She'd worked off-duty security at the restaurant before. They trusted her. She had a key. She wasn't just a cop. She was someone they welcomed in. But this time, something felt different. The third time she showed up, she came alone. And she wasn't there for food. Xiao Chao Vu felt it right away. Frank's energy had changed. Something was off. Chao quickly hid the restaurant's cash in a microwave, sensing danger. Frank came through the back door, moving fast. She forced Chao, her brother Quang, and another worker into the kitchen. Another officer, Ronald Williams, Frank's colleague, was also working security that night. He saw what was happening and followed. But before he could make it into the kitchen, Rogers LaCaze appeared from behind. He fired once into Williams' neck, then again, then a third time. Williams dropped immediately, paralyzed, then dead. Frank didn't flinch. In the chaos, Chao and Quang managed to pull the other worker into the freezer and shut off the light. They held their breath in silence. What they heard next was terrifying. Frank and LaCaze were yelling, demanding to know where the money was. Ha and Quoc Vu were still out in the open. They didn't know where the cash had been hidden. Frank pistol-whipped Quoc for answers. Still nothing. Eventually, she found the money in the microwave. But instead of leaving, she opened fire. Ha was shot 3 times. Quoc was hit 6 times. Both died instantly. Frank and LaCaze left, thinking no one else had survived. But inside that freezer, Chao and Quang were still alive. They tried calling 911 from a cell phone, but couldn't get a signal. So Quang slipped out and ran to a neighbor's house. That's when help was finally called. And that's when the case took its most disturbing turn. After the murders, Antoinette Frank didn't run. She didn't hide. She dropped LaCaze off somewhere, turned on her portable police radio, and that's when she heard the call go out. Officer down. Kim On restaurant. Frank knew exactly what that meant. And instead of disappearing, she made a bold move. She borrowed a marked police car, put her uniform back on, and drove straight back to the crime scene, acting like a cop responding to the emergency. She had her badge, her gun, and her story ready. But she didn't come back to help. She came back to kill the last 2 witnesses, Chao and Quang Vu. She entered through the back entrance just as Chao, still in shock, had made it to the front. When she saw Frank walking in, Chao screamed and ran toward the officers outside. "You saw what happened. You killed my brother and sister." Frank froze. Her cover was gone. She tried to act confused, said she had no idea what was happening. She even pretended to investigate, but it was too late. The survivors had seen everything. The truth was out. And right there at the scene, Antoinette Frank was arrested. While Antoinette Frank sat in jail, charged with 3 murders, another secret was waiting to surface. Just 1 month after she was sentenced to death, a neighbor's dog started digging under her house. What it uncovered shocked everyone. Buried in the dirt beneath the foundation was a human skull, with a bullet hole in the back. Police immediately opened an investigation. The remains were believed to belong to Adam Frank, Antoinette's father. He had been reported missing by Frank herself 2 years earlier, in 1993. She told police he'd disappeared after staying at her house for a short time. No follow-ups, no media coverage. The case quietly vanished, just like he had. Now, detectives believed the truth was much darker. Frank hadn't lost her father. She'd killed him, and buried him beneath her own home. She later told jail psychologists that her father had abused her for years. She said he was violent, controlling, and had raped her repeatedly as a child. But the state never brought formal charges. One officer explained it simply, "She's already on death row. What's the point?" But for many, this discovery raised new questions, not just about Frank's crimes, but about how long she had been hiding them. By mid-1995, both Antoinette Frank and Rogers LaCaze were headed to trial. For LaCaze, things moved quickly. In July 1995, just 4 months after the murders, he was convicted and sentenced to death. His biggest mistake? Using Officer Ronald Williams' credit card at a gas station, only minutes after the killings. The evidence against him was clear. But Frank's trial was even more shocking, not because of what happened inside the courtroom, but what didn't. Her defense team had subpoenaed 39 witnesses, but when the trial began, they didn't call a single one. No testimony, no expert opinions, nothing. It was like they had given up before the case even started. The prosecution, on the other hand, had everything they needed. Survivors took the stand and described the night in detail. The murder weapon was traced directly back to her. And even though Frank later tried to withdraw her confession, it was already on record, detailed and damning. The jury didn't waste time. After just 22 minutes, they returned with a verdict, guilty on all counts. It was one of the fastest convictions for a capital murder case in New Orleans history. The next day, the same jury recommended the death penalty. That decision took 45 minutes. On October 20th, 1995, Antoinette Frank was formally sentenced to die by lethal injection. She was transferred to the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women in St. Gabriel, where she would become the only woman on the state's death row. One of the lead detectives on the case, Eddie Rance, later said, "She's the coldest person I've ever met, and I've been doing this for 30 years." After Antoinette Frank was sentenced to death, her case didn't fade away. Instead, it entered a legal maze that would stretch on for decades. Her defense team filed appeal after appeal, arguing that her trial was flawed. They claimed she had been denied funding for expert witnesses and that her mental health history had been ignored. The courts listened but didn't act. Over the years, death warrants were signed, then revoked. Judges were removed. Questions were raised about forged signatures and courtroom misconduct. But no final decision ever stuck. Then came politics. In 2023, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards publicly announced his opposition to the death penalty. He called for its complete abolition. Sensing an opportunity, 56 of the 57 inmates on Louisiana's death row, including Frank, filed clemency petitions. But the state parole board wasn't moved. In October 2023, they denied Frank's request. No mercy, no reduction, just a firm decision her sentence would stand. At that point, it looked like every option had been used. But her story still wasn't over. In early 2025, Louisiana made headlines by introducing a new method of execution, nitrogen hypoxia. It marked the state's first execution in over 15 years. But Antoinette Frank wasn't on the list. While others were scheduled to die, she still had one move left. On April 28, 2025, her legal team filed a new motion to overturn her death sentence. This time, they argued that past trial errors, lack of expert support, and her documented trauma warranted a full resentencing. Surprisingly, the court listened. On May 15, 2025, a judge officially accepted the motion and scheduled a new sentencing hearing for December 2025. It was the most serious challenge to her death sentence in 30 years. The state attorney general tried to block the hearing. He filed an emergency intervention. But the judge refused to stop it. For now, the hearing will move forward. So, after decades on death row, Antoinette Frank might escape execution. Not because she was found innocent, not because the facts changed, but because the system she once served may now give her one final chance to live. Antoinette Frank's case is more than just a story of murder. It's a mirror held up to the cracks in law enforcement, mental health screening, and the justice system itself. How did someone with a documented history of instability pass through 2 psychiatric red flags and still get a badge? How did so many warning signs, abuse of power, ties to criminals, internal misconduct, go ignored? And when everything finally collapsed, was it too late for real justice? Frank wasn't just a criminal in uniform. She was also a product of a system that never stopped her. Whether her actions came from cold calculation or deep trauma, the outcome was the same. Innocent lives were taken. Trust was shattered. Now, with a new sentencing hearing on the horizon, the question isn't just about punishment. It's about responsibility. Can trauma ever excuse what she did? Should a past filled with pain change what the future holds? And if she escapes execution, what message does that send? We may never get clear answers, but at Crime Shade, we believe these stories matter, because justice doesn't stop at the courtroom door. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and keep asking questions.